hey, looks like this is a step in the right direction. So earlier on Mint Street Mondays, myself, co-host Brad, had a pretty spirited conversation about the Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard situation, right? And it was for a good reason. A decision had to be made, right? There's no way that you can see what Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle do on the field together respectively and walk away with what you've seen Rico do consistently over the past few games and not at least have a dialogue internally about the potential for a change to happen. Well, it looks like Dave Canales has finally come around to the possibility that, hey, maybe me and the coaches, me and the team need to get together, have some really tough conversations, because we know Chuba is a guy that they see, and they've said as much in the offseason. Chuba is one of those guys that's seen as a team leader, right? And rightfully so. He's been here for quite some time. He's seen some of the worst of us. He's had an opportunity to be a part of some of the best of us going down the stretch last year. And finally, with a 500 record this year, he gets hurt. And it's like, man, you want to see him get an opportunity to come out and contribute when things are starting to go better. However, when you see what you've gotten in production from someone else, it makes it difficult, right? Because this is still a production-based business. So Dave Canales had a chance to talk to the media today. And I'll be honest with you, during my passionate rant on my show earlier this morning, yeah, I was a little bit turned up about it, right? Because the last thing that you would want to see is someone like Dave Canales, who looks like he's turning the corner, make a decision and a potential mistake that could, if it got bad enough, could potentially cost you your job. I don't want to see that. And I don't think anybody's advocating for that, right? But at the same time, I don't want to necessarily be appeased by a decision that I, or even some of my other, fans, the other fans out here want, right? But what's more important, the production or the personality? And I think it's clear here. So I want to listen to some of this, what he had to say about this, especially when it gets to when David Newton, of all people, starts asking questions.
Bryce, as well as Cade Mays and Taylor Moden.
Yeah, so with Bryce just getting better every day, had a good session running.
Just covering some of the injuries
today and return to play. And the goal is to get him out there on Wednesday, move him around and see if we can get him into practice in a mode. So I'm optimistic that he'll be out there, but we're going to take it day to day with him. Let's see, Taylor and the rest of the guys will give the injury report on Wednesday.
And then wanted to ask you, there's been a stark difference in production between Rico and Chuba over the last 2 weeks. How has that changed your outlook on this rotation, and what have you noticed about why that is?
Yeah, it's a fair observation, and Chuba's meant a lot to this organization, certainly to the identity that we wanted to build our team on, and wanted to give Chuba the opportunity to go out there and to continue to impact our team in a positive way. We cannot ignore the fact that Rico has been exceptional, in a couple of games, and then in the opportunities he's had over the last 2 weeks, he's made some excellent plays. Love the tempo and violence that he's running with, and these are all things that we're talking about and working through this week as we look back, on these last 4 games and really taking a snapshot of what's been successful for us. These are conversations that we do definitely have to have.
I would never put someone in a position to suggest that, they're intentionally not allowing themselves to be successful, like almost self-sabotage, right? Some people do that in life. You think more about what you want as opposed to what is, right? Musicians struggle with this sometimes. You may work on a song forever and think, man, I finally got one. And then you put out an album, but the crowd chooses a specific record and your company's like, hey, this needs to be your single. You're like, well, no, I got this whole thing planned out. Like, this is going to be my first single. This is going to be the second. Yeah, but the crowd says different. And this is one of those situations. Again, Chuba, model citizen. Dave Canales talked about how he got emotional. Like, there's an attachment to these players now, right? So he got emotional when Xavier Legette had a good game last week because of all the turmoil that he's been through. Seeing someone like Chuba get hurt, come back, and not be as productive has to be emotional as well. But I'll circle back to something that Dave Canales said early in his beginning press conferences, right? When asked about players like Burns and Jeremy Chin and Luvu and others, right? And he mentioned, well, I don't really have that kind of emotional tie to some of these guys. So the writing was on the wall. All of those guys just happen to be gone, right? So I think that there has to be room to have that same level. I mean, I know it's cutthroat, and it sounds really cutthroat, right? Because I had someone, I'm kind of breaking the fourth wall here. Someone had commented and mentioned, there's no loyalty, or whatever. And I'm like, I mean, if you want to go there, you can go there. I understand it. I don't think that anybody's calling for Chuba to be benched. What we're calling for is for Rico to get the lion's share of the carries. Because even in the games that Chuba Hubbard missed, Trevor Etienne, DJ Dallas, these guys all got opportunities, right? What we're saying is like, look, you can see it clear as day. If you don't see it, the stats show it. Shout out to John Ellis on X. Yards per attempt, third. This is minimum 50 carries. Total EPA, third. EPA rush, third. Success percentage, second. Explosive percentage, fifth. First down, third. Rush yards, fifth. There's no way that what you see at the end of this, that player can have only 35% of your offensive snaps. No way. No way. Let's keep listening.
Talking to and looking at right now. So we'll make that decision as the week goes on once we know where everyone's at.
Yeah, thanks, Coach.
Yep.
David Newton, followed by Joe Person.
Hey, Coach, can you expand a little bit on...
Just look at his face when he's... as soon as he hears Newton's voice. This is hilarious.
What you were talking about, Rico and Chuba. You were highly praising Rico. Does that mean you're considering going back to maybe more a heavy load for Rico and just changing up the way you're doing things?
That's something we're looking at. And, again, have to respect the job that Chuba has done for us and to get us to the point where we've established a mentality about how we run. And we cannot ignore the fact that Rico has made an impact when he's been out there. So these are things that we're talking through as a staff, and we'll make that decision as the week goes on.
And when you looked at what happened after the game a little bit with us.
All right, so that's more about the scrum that happened after the game. But I'm glad he acknowledged that. Multiple times talked about how Chuba has done so much for this team, right? But I knew that these conversations were going to get loud. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of glad they did. They needed to. These conversations needed to be extremely loud. Because if and Brad said this earlier, so I'm not going to, take his credit from him for this, right? But if you're going to preach change, effective change, maybe that change includes someone new that you brought in that's hearing your message a little bit louder and a little bit clearer, right? And it's showing in the production. I've often argued, right? And people know I do have a bias towards Rico Dowdle. I'm not going to lie about it, right? Proximity. But the point is that it doesn't matter what I think as far as my biases or anything like that is concerned. And again, I do have to reiterate for those who may not catch it, I am not advocating for Chuba Hubbard to be benched. That is not what this is, right? I am only saying that whatever production is giving you the best chance to win, that's who you go with. And I'm glad that Dave Canales stamped his foot down and is making this decision. This is a very tough decision. I will say that, right? But it needs to be made. So salute to Dave Canales. Salute to the front office. Man, let's keep this thing going. I'm looking forward to what this looks like against Green Bay, because if he heats up, it could be interesting. You go into Lambeau and do some things with Bryce Young and Chuba and, help you. Well, I guess the changed offensive line, right? Do got some, major injuries. Brady Christensen out for the year. But I still think you got enough to get things done, right? And outside of the end of the game last night against Pittsburgh, Green Bay showed they've got some vulnerabilities, especially in the run game. So it'll be interesting to see what we do. But either way, let me know what you think below. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you never miss a video. This is John from the One Carolina Show. Keep pounding.